Have you ever wondered why Cilli, the one province mine in the Balkans, is so overpowered in diplomacy? With traditions such as diplomatic reputation +1 and -10% diplomacy cost. I did too, and so found out that the Celje Dynasty went from nothing to one of the most influential dynasties in the whole of Europe. If we were at a 15th century party, this dynasty would be the life of the party. So without further ado, please do subscribe if you love history content, and let's find out why this family was so successful in rising through the ranks during this time. We begin our story by going back where a family owned a small castle on the River San and were known as the Celje Dynasty. Although the family was powerful in their local area, there was clearly much more powerful and larger families at the time. In 1284, a man by the name of Ulrich was head of the Celje Dynasty at the time. He was the first significant member of the dynasty, as he made the first steps towards increasing the power of the family. During this time, the HRE Emperor Rudolf von Habsburg was in dispute with King Ottokar of the Bohemians. Ulrich pledged himself to the Habsburg cause and effectively became a Habsburg vassal.
Oh my, what a lovely chin you have.
Ulrich fought in the Battle of Marchfield in 1278 on the Habsburg side. During the battle, the Habsburg ruler flanked the Bohemians and won a crushing victory that allowed him to gain power within the empire. Later on, Ulrich secured politically valuable marriages within the region and therefore managed to grow his power. Upon his death, his son Friedrich took control of the Sanic estates. Friedrich inherited from both his mother and father's side, giving him more power. It was clear from the start that he was even more ambitious than his father, and managed to inherit a large amount of estates within the region from other dynasties. The Baron remained loyal to the Habsburg, and eventually was given the castle of Celje and became the Count of Cilli, which elevated his rank into court. Upon his death in 1359, Friedrich was one of the most powerful nobles in the region. His son, Hermann I, maintained the power of the Celje dynasty within the area, but what really propelled the dynasty to gain even more power was his grandson, Hermann II. Hermann II gained control of the dynasty in 1385. He was a man with a vision to be elevated to the title of a prince in the Holy Roman Empire, and merge the Celje estates into an independent land. And if he was able to achieve this, he would only be second in rank to the king. 11 years later, in 1396, a golden opportunity would present itself in a crusade against Bayezid I of the Ottoman Empire. During the Battle of Nicopolis, the Ottomans surrounded the Crusader army, and it looked like the Hungarian king, Sigismund, would be captured. But then Hermann II saved the king, and the two took a fishing boat back to Hungary. Although he was defeated in battle, this was a victory for Hermann, as he was given great lands and cities for his service in helping the king to safety, which therefore led him to become one of the greatest landowners in Slavonia. Hermann became a prince of the Holy Roman Empire. Sigismund also eventually married his daughter, Barbara of Cilli. It was clear, therefore, that Hermann became incredibly powerful and was one of the most important representatives of the line of the Celje counts, going from having a family of just local importance to becoming a major player in European politics, with him eventually securing royal marriages with the Kingdom of Poland. Hermann was also one of the founders of Sigismund's elite Order of the Dragon. While high praise should be considered for Hermann II, his son Friedrich II is another matter, who is the starting ruler for Cilli in EU4. In the early 1420s, the House of the Counts of Cilli was shaken by a massive scandal, and this dynasty was caught up in a 15th century twisted Balkan love story. Rumours spread that Friedrich fell madly in love with a lady of lower descent, known as Veronica, and consequently he strangled his wife to death, who was part of a really important Croatian noble family. Friedrich was then locked up. Although he would be released later, the same can't be said for his lover Veronica, who was accused of witchcraft and was drowned by Hermann's knights. This was a devastating family crisis, and the feud between Hermann and his son continued. In 1435, Friedrich II rebelled against his father by demanding concessions from the Hungarian king. However, this rebellion stopped when Hermann died, on the 30th of November 1436. Friedrich II and his son were then elevated to ranks of princes. The princes of Celje now became legal contenders for the empire's crown, which endangered the unity of the Habsburg estates. Between the years of 1436 and 1443, a war ensued between the two families. Although the House of Celje proved strong on the battlefield, they had to accept a ceasefire, and in 1443, a mutual inheritance contract was signed by the two families. Eventually, Friedrich died in 1454, leaving his son, Ulrich II, the last surviving male dynasty member. During his reign, he became regent of Bohemia for some time. In 1452, he forced the emperor, Friedrich III, to hand over the boy, King Ladislaus V, to his keeping, and therefore became practically the ruler of Hungary. The Hungarians now conspired to destroy him, and on the 8th of November, in spite of warnings, Ulrich entered the city of Belgrade with the king. The next day, he was attacked and was stabbed to death. On this day, this was the death of the Celje Dynasty, with him being the last male heir of the Counts of Cilli. It was clear that Count Ulrich's ambition was boundless, but sadly his ambitions certainly got him killed by other powerful families. After his death, the Habsburgs eventually inherited the land of Celje. So, within a few hundred years, this family rose from an obscure castle to one of the most powerful dynasties in Europe. This family did it by backing the right people, securing very beneficial alliances, and a bit of luck. The fact that they were able to do this so rapidly really does show why that this one province minor is insane at diplomacy, since their rise was almost entirely due to them being diplomatically competent. Enjoyed this? Check out some of my other history videos.